Hello, my name is Will Stroll. I'm one of the sales engineers at .NET New Corporation, and this is the fourth video in my series of videos that are covering presentations and being a speaker. In this one, I'll be talking about some of the things that you should use as best practices when using PowerPoint, as well as some of the things that you absolutely do not want to do. This is probably one of my more favorite topics. Now, this is just an overview of what we'll be talking about in this video. There are some very simple but often ignored best practices that you'll need to follow if you want your attendees to remember you and your presentation in a good way once it's over. Now, if you present a slideshow to anyone in any manner close to how I just did on that last slide, you'll definitely have an audience that looks or feels like this, or both. If you get any clapping or smiles at the end of your presentation, it won't be because it was good, it'll be because they are excited it's finally over. The worst part is even what you see while you're there. The worst part is not even what you'll see while you're there. It's what people do or do not say once you're gone. You must do everything in your power to leave a long-lasting positive impression on your audience. So this is one of my favorite books out there. It's a book that analyzes usability in websites, and the title says it all. Steve Krug is a widely accepted usability expert, and one point he tries to make throughout the book is if you force your visitor to think about something, you're not helping them move towards your goals. For example, if I have to look for a buy now button, chances are they are going to give up and buy from somebody else. If you waste their time, they're moving on. So the principles in this book can be applied to nearly any design, including the design of your PowerPoint slides. If your audience feels like their time is being wasted, you will see it and you lost them. Any hopes you had of retaining them, retaining any of the points you presented are low. So I don't want to waste your time now, so let's jump into the next tip. So the first best practice that will sound counterintuitive to nearly all of you, and it really should too. We've been taught in school and in business that when we want to plan a presentation, we should open PowerPoint immediately. It's been ingrained to us that this is our first step. The truth is that this couldn't be further from what we should actually be doing. PowerPoint is one of the last steps you should take when putting your presentation together. Obviously, any presentation starts with an idea, but you must add some substance to that idea before you truly begin putting your presentation together. You need to have a clear understanding of the state of mind of your audience before your presentation and where you want to be at the end of that presentation. This requires planning potentially several steps in between to create arguments, examples, use cases, supporting references, and more that will help support the proposed idea that you leave them with. The age-old example of this kind of brainstorming is to use a bar napkin. This isn't so far from what you should be doing. Regardless of the tools you use, sketching and writing ideas in a brainstorm fashion is essential. I gave a presentation last year to the Queen City .NET Nuke user group. The chosen topic was to speak about the various resources you have at your disposal to learn about and help you with .NET Nuke. Now, instead of mapping out those resources in a brainstorming session, I was able to reuse a visual brainstorm that was presented previously by .NET New Corporation co-founder Nick Caliani. He used this diagram during a keynote presentation at a conference, .NET Nuke World in Chicago. It was essential to my first step in planning my own presentation. Now, if you read any of the thought leaders out there that regularly write books about presentations, they will all tell you to use sticky notes or another medium like it. This allows you to jot down all of your presentation ideas and sort them out. I first began using actual sticky notes, but I quickly found out it took up too much of my desk. So my final version of this this stage of planning was to use the built-in sticky notes application in Windows 7, like you see here. Now, one great thing to note about this technique is it didn't knock me down into the box of thinking about what PowerPoint would and wouldn't allow me to do. As a result, I was able to plan high notes and low notes, and throughout the presentation move them around until I saw the right flow. And all of this was done before I created a single slide or even opened PowerPoint. The final step before opening up PowerPoint is to storyboard the ideas that you generated during your brainstorm and during your sticky note planning sessions. This will help you think of the best ways to show an idea without being confined to thinking about and looking at what's available in the toolbar in PowerPoint. Now, animations can be great, but only if they're used to help tell your story or to help illustrate an idea. In general, it's very rare to see animations used in a responsible way in a presentation. Most people use them in ways that either babysit the attendees or in other ways that don't appear to serve any purpose whatsoever. And I challenge you to do better than that. If you use the word cool in describing your animation, you did it for the wrong reason. Now, when using animations, there should never be any question or doubt in the mind of your audience why an animation is there. If they're looking at it, thinking about it, or wondering why it's there, there is a very important thing that they are not doing. That important thing is listening to you and what you're trying to say. So this is a great example of one of the ways that you can use animations in a good way. Instead of the standard profile photo and bullet point list slide to introduce myself at .NET Nuke World 2011, I took a different spin on a timeline, using one slide per talking point and a transition in each slide that gave the illusion that we were progressing to the next item in a longer timeline. Using arrows and animation, they were able to walk through my story with me, through what I was saying and through the slides that helped identify visually that they were moving from something either laterally or in the same year or the same level of importance, moving up the proverbial ladder, so to speak. Now, nearly any professional speaker will tell you that PowerPoint themes are bad. They're usually very bad, in fact. They employ and promote worst practices and lock the presenter into a specific style of slides and presentation techniques. This very slide deck with the footer is a great example of that. Themes almost always are missing elements or layouts as well. However, themes can be necessary in a necessary evil in corporate environments and in most conferences. When the necessary evil arises, just be sure to do the best you can with what you have. I propose to you that if you have a choice about the matter, your theme should be consistency and not a literal PowerPoint theme. So there's no right or wrong answer when we talk about what your background color should be. There's a golden rule, though. Don't choose a background that is busy or contains colors that are difficult to contrast text and graphics with. The best colors to run with are white or black. I prefer black myself. We could easily have a day-long discussion on what's better, but know this: if you choose one, stick with it. Don't mix white and black backgrounds in the same presentation. Doing this is very jarring to the eyesight of many people, and it requires their eyes to adjust to change, especially if it's on a projector. Now, any theme or brand will have a general color palette, and yours should too. Built-in color palettes in PowerPoint are generally good, but if you choose to deviate from them, just be sure to be consistent throughout your presentation and choose colors that will complement each other. Using the example you see here, it probably would be a bad idea to add neon green to the color palette. The last part of your own template is that we'll talk about today is your fonts. It's generally frowned upon to have more than 3 fonts and font sizes in your presentation. This, of course, can vary from presentation to presentation, but any business-related presentation should adhere to this rule very strictly. Carefully plan for the styles that you employ in bullets and normal text. Also have a specific and consistent style for all titles and subtitles. Now, this is definitely an example of what not to do. It's easy when you're playing with PowerPoint slides, one slide at a time, to think that a slide looks great. However, when you combine it among a collection of slides in the same presentation, you can see how easily that single slide will stand out in a bad way. Moving one from one style background to another, with fonts, styles that are different, it's all quite distracting. You can see how switching a color theme has the very same effect. Audience members will immediately be wondering why such a color change is there. They'll be saying things themselves like, does that slide mean more than the others? Why didn't he say so? I wonder which colors I like better. I don't think I should be doing that in my presentation tomorrow. Basically they're not thinking about what you're saying, they're thinking about what they're thinking about. Okay, so this is one of the biggest pain points that most of the world can identify with. Nothing can kill a presentation easier and faster than slide after slide of bullet point lists. These kind of presentations only became popular since software like PowerPoint was introduced into the workplace. Before that, presentations were a very professional thing. Now it takes nearly no effort to generate a bullet point, and the same bullet points can drain the energy out of your audience faster than anything else you can do wrong during your presentation. Avoid bullets like the plague. So I think we can all agree that this is a pretty standard slide in nearly any place that we've worked. In fact, the picture is probably out of place. You more than likely don't see any images in your business presentations, at least not often. Let's look at the information now. You know, everything in this slide is true. All bullet points are valid information that we definitely should talk about. And like the slide suggests, I doubt you've been completely listening to me. Your attention is diverted. You're reading the slide. If I'm standing in front of you, I am undoubtedly looking at the slide too. Remembering all those words in each bullet point is difficult. You know, as a presenter, I don't want to miss any of them. After all, I put them there for a reason, and when I look to make sure I'm hitting all the bullet points, I encourage you to do the same as an audience member. Together, we're no longer paying attention to what we are there to do, and instead we're all reading together. If this was what a presentation was all about, we could just do the same thing in a series of emails. So rethinking bullet points will force you to display them in different ways. If you choose to be at least a little creative, you'll have an unlimited number of ways to display and discuss a list of bullet points to your audience. You know, one example would include the timeline that I showed you earlier. Another could be simply having a single bullet discussed per slide. Others could be turning bullets into graphics. You know, if this is one of the best ways, because the right graphic can actually invoke the same kind of response you're looking for, and this is, after all, why we're giving a presentation in the first place. And by the way, there's no limit on the number of slides that you should have. Now, there's a much more engaging presentation of the previous slide. You know, all of those bullet points can be boiled down into the two different statements that you see here. In fact, you don't even need to mention those very words, and you shouldn't. And why? Because you've already read them. Why should I read it back to you? Instead, this is the moment that I will mention all the points in the previous slide. They should be memorized and retold in your own words, and they can even be in the slide notes. You know, what an audience member is seeing instead is reinforcing the points I'm speaking about. It's helping me tell a story to you. Now, all too often a presenter will think that a bullet point is necessary, or bullet points are necessary. You want to be able to hand out the slides to your audience as a reference for later. You may even think you're doing them a favor. Unfortunately, this couldn't be further from the truth. If you feel that your audience needs something after the presentation to reinforce your ideas, you should create a handout and give it to them at the end of your presentation. You know, what you see here is exactly that. It's a list of references that we were talking about during a presentation. And by the way, I know you're reading it while I was talking. This in itself is an idea that you shouldn't apply only to slideshows. Apply it to email, web pages, documents, and pretty much everything else you can think of. I'm going to refer to that book one final time. In it, Steve Krug introduces the idea of omitting useless words. This is actually an extension of the 17th rule in E.B. White's The Elements of Style. While White suggests to omit useless words in sentences, Krug takes this a step further. Basically, he tells you to write down what you want to say. Then take that and reduce it by half. And what you should actually keep is half of what is left. This was written with web pages in mind, but it can also be applied to slides. The fewer words on a slide, the better. Now, Nancy Duarte is, hopefully I say that right, is one of the most popular authors in presentations, and she makes it very clear that you don't need to be a designer to design a great slide. The first things that people try to do when creating a slide is that they try to fill up all of the available space. This is absolutely not necessary. Open space and white space, they're both very good. And it's much more important to not clutter the slide. Instead, try to make sure that it looks pleasing to the eye and not too busy and easy to digest. If you're not familiar with white space, it's simply the areas of the design that don't have any content in it. It doesn't necessarily need to be white to be referred to as white space, but when it's used right, it can make a slide look incredible. Now, charts have traditionally been an excellent way to show data in meaningful ways. However, in an attempt to be thorough or show a grander picture, most presenters use charts incorrectly. And instead of using or showing just the important data, they tend to show all of the data, including information that means nothing to the audience. In effect, these kind of research or these kind of things severely dilute the point of slides and your presentation overall. Also, if members of your audience aren't used to seeing that much information in a chart, they will be confused before, during, and yes, even after you explain the important information. I've seen it many times. So before you see any examples, it's important to remember rule number 1 for charts. Never use 3D charts. They do nothing to help visualize data, and they usually make it much more difficult to see what you're actually trying to tell people. 3D charts are bad. Now this is a prime example. When you use a chart, the point you're trying to make should be obvious at a glance. Sure, you can take a few moments to see what somebody might be trying to tell you with this chart, but if it takes a few moments of thought, you've already lost your audience, and in some cases, your credibility. So that very same information is much more obvious and shown in this way. Instead of expecting the audience to figure things out, we've chosen a much more suitable chart and modified it slightly to make it obvious what is important here. The HTML module is used 54% of the time in this example. By the way, these aren't actual statistics. They were made up for the purpose of this presentation, so don't quote me. So another way that you should choose to show this using the original bar chart is to make the elements that you want the audience to focus on stand out more than the other elements in the chart. Note how the bars that are unimportant are transparent compared to the bars that we want the audience to pay attention to. However, if the only thing we wanted to tell people is that the HTML module is used more, there's a much more effective way to tell the audience. Why use a chart at all? Get creative. Show them what you're talking about with a graphic and very clearly stated text. If the other data is important, be prepared to give a few stats as well. You can put that in your slideshow notes. Once again, this is not a real statistic though. It's made up for this presentation, so don't quote me. Alright, so you'd be surprised at how many people out there have English degrees and similar backgrounds. You'd be even more surprised at how many of those people will end up in your audience. Then there are those that are simply a stickler for details. I'm not really sure who outnumbers who in these categories. Few things in your presentation will annoy these people than having to see randomly capitalized words. At best, you will annoy them. At worst, they will question your credibility and stop thinking of you as a thought leader of any kind. This is a great example of a horrible thing. Randomly capitalized words. In a real presentation, such a thing might not be as blatant as what you see here, but you will notice it. Remember, only titles and nouns should be capitalized, and if your presentation does this in any other way, just be consistent. Don't forget about punctuation either. Be consistent with that too. Now, graphics can make and break a presentation. Even if all you do is add a few well-selected graphics to your presentation, it will improve the way people perceive you and your presentation. If you choose the wrong graphics, quite the opposite will happen. The first thing most people think of when the idea comes to add graphics to their presentation is to use image searches on sites like Google and Bing. However, this is not generally a best practice. First, finding appropriate images can be challenging. Second, nearly none of these images are free for you to use. They are protected under copyright. If you are presenting to an audience at a convention or to a prospective customer, the last thing you want to do is show copyrighted images. Even if they look great, most people can tell at a glance whether or not your graphics came from an image search. So here's an example. Do an image search for partner or partnership. It'll bring up numerous images like this one. It's the most generic depiction of a partnership. First of all, get creative. Find another graphical way to show a partnership to your audience. This image looks okay otherwise though, but it's not what you would find most times. You have to remember that the images in any image search are not optimized in any way for a presentation. Therefore, you're much more likely to end up with a version of that image that looks more like this. And if you're lucky, that'll be the worst version of the image that you end up with. Unfortunately, most images these days found in image search, and the good ones anyways, also include watermarks showing who owns the copyright to use them. And if you're not paying attention, it could be quite easy to add an image like this to your own presentation. And you're much better off from a legal, a creative, and a professional perspective to get images from reputable sources. So one of my favorite places to grab images from costs money, and that's iStock Photo. They don't just have images, but also audio, video, and more. They are a great value. Getting images is another good place to go as well, with similar features, but they are much more expensive. One of the things I would suggest is to check a couple of free stock graphics sites first. You can often find some great graphics for free and save a few bucks. They also include they include Stock Vault and Stock Exchange. Both have a large number of stock graphics that are more than usable. Some of the graphics you might want to include in your presentation include those that are often referred to as a screenshot, where you basically have a still image of your computer screen or just a section of the screen. Jing is a wonderful tool to quickly and easily grab the entire screen or any section of the screen. It allows you to annotate and share the image as well as do video capture. And it has free and paid versions. Now for graphic editing, most of the world uses Photoshop, but if you don't have the budget for it, Paint.net is an excellent open source alternative. It has all the common features that you need for preparing images for a presentation. So PowerPoint is only one of the tools to tell a story during your presentation. You have many other mediums that you can use to further enhance your presentation. So mix in other types of storytelling tools in meaningful ways to make your presentation stand out above the rest in a good way. So you shouldn't be afraid of using video in your presentations. If done right, it can be a superb storytelling tool. Sound is much more difficult to use wisely, but it can be useful. Don't forget about yourself. You are the focal point of this presentation. You are the storyteller. You are one of the mediums already. Use body language, tone, and eye contact to your advantage. And as silly as it sounds, props can indeed be used if planned ahead of time. I've seen toy lightsabers, candy bars, whiteboards, sketch pads, and even more used in a very entertaining way that can help keep an audience engaged in a presentation. Now it seems kind of ironic or counterintuitive to mention this concerning what you just saw on the last slide, but the last slide was really meant to make a point, but outside the context of what we were talking about here, I would never suggest putting together a slide like that. Your slides should be much more simple. They should present themselves in the simplest way possible with the least amount of text, noise, and distraction. There shouldn't be too many animations, if any, and there shouldn't be too many things to look at. You should have only one main idea or point per slide, and it's okay to spend only a couple of seconds on a slide during presentation if it makes sense to the audience and it still reinforces the point you're trying to make. Just remember to keep in mind that each of these ideas should be leading to the overall idea that your presentation is really about. Your presentation is there for a reason. Regardless to whether you're trying to sell something, inspire, or instruct, there is an underlying idea and intent. You're trying to change somebody's mind or influence them in a certain way. It's not just for the sake of doing it either. There is a benefit to believing in this idea. It will solve some kind of problem that they're having, even if they don't realize it just yet. So your presentation is a representation of that idea, but shown as a collection of smaller ideas that support the argument you're trying to make. And if done right, you will have influenced your attendees to make them consider your idea or change their mind altogether to support your idea. So 97% of all Fortune 100 executives, they say presentation skills affected their advancement. This comes from the Journal of Business Communication. And I just wanted to leave you with this final point here because it is pretty significant.